Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Privet, bonjour, guten tag, hola, and ciao to my foreign friends. This video today, we're going to be talking about comparison between a GEC and a early 20th century knife. This is a question that came out from Little Man's Corner. He said he'd like to see a video comparing one of those earlier knives to a GEC. But what I really think he was trying to convey to me in his statement was I think a lot of guys think these GECs are better than early 20th century knives. So part of the problem there is you're looking at knives that are 100 to 120 years old and trying to compare them to a brand new knife. And so you're going to have some problems with that because you've got some wear. Beautiful case, sleeve board knife, finely made, nickel silver pins, nickel silver liners, bolsters, really nice knife here. But it's 100 years old, and so it's worn. A lot of times, the knives are bent. You can't really compare the gap and issue that we have nowadays to old knives because they've been used. But I do have some good examples of old knives. And the other thing is, I have a large collection. So when I'm looking at knives, I'm not looking at just one knife from a specific time period. I'm not looking at just this knife from 1890, right, to compare to other knives. I have a lot of different companies, over 160 different companies that I can look at. And so it's not a generalization, right? When I'm looking at these knives, you just plain see better quality, better build quality in the knives pre-1940, let's say, over even a GEC. And the other thing I want to mention is these are fantastic knives. Awesome, awesome knives. I have 4 of them. They're very well built and fantastic knives. So I'm not putting this knife down, and I don't think it's a put down to say that knives in the early part of the 20th century were just built better. Okay, there's a lot of economics. There's a lot of engineering stuff that goes into that. How they made knives, how they have to make knives nowadays. So today, they use a lot of machines. In fact, I think GEC mostly uses machines when they're producing their knives. That in itself produces a certain quality because you definitely get a much more consistent knife with a machine than you do if that knife is handmade by a human being. So in that respect, knives nowadays are much better than the turn of the century. And so you don't want to get confused with better over better quality. And so take the steel. So in the turn of the century, knife companies were still using the Bessemer steel process, which made a cleaner, better, stronger steel than the cast steel. Okay, so after that, around the 40s, I think they went to the arc process, which used the electricity to produce steel. And the steel between that process and the Bessemer process is better. That's the steel we use today, that arc process, and it's just a lot better steel. So the steel in these knives are definitely better than the steel in these knives. A lot of guys love the high carbon steels from these knives. They're easy to sharpen. They're wicked sharp when you sharpen them up, and you hear that a lot from guys. What's better? These steels GEC makes, is going to be a lot stronger, last a lot longer than these older steels have. So there are certain things about modern processes that are better. But anyhow, let's take a look at the knives, and I want to point out what we're talking about when we say knives in the early 20th century were built better. So these knives, I don't think were intended to be, but have become premium examples of traditional folders. Great Eastern Cutlery produces these advertised as in a traditional manner. And so they're putting together these knives as close as they can, to the way knives used to be made. And by that, basically, you're talking about the quality of the knife. And these are very high quality knives, by the way. But I could point out things about these knives. Let's take the top scale, for instance. So if you look at that top scale, it's just really deeply gouged and not even really shined up. So you could shine that up, those gouges. That's just a process of from stamping the blades out, but they haven't cleaned it up. And the reason they haven't is because they're putting a lot of time in the other areas of this knife and still trying to sell it at a price point that people will buy it. So economics plays a big part in how they make knives nowadays. And labor costs were a lot lower back in the day. Here's a knife that dates between 1965 and 1970, and you can see the top square is a lot cleaner. It still has some stamp marks, but this is a time frame when the quality of traditional folders is going down in this time frame right here. And when you look over, you can see it's nicely shined up here, even the end of the back spring, you know, just a really nice knife. The way this knife is made, I think the jigging is better on these older knives. I'll point some more of that out in a minute. But this is a really nice knife. This, nothing special. This is not a premium knife. This is just an average knife that Case produced. Look at the shine on that knife, that mirror polish, compared to the GEC knife. It's a brushed stainless finish. That's okay. Okay, but that is not a high mirror polish on that knife. It's shined up and it's brushed. You can see the grooves in the line there. They just simply didn't do that back in the day, back in the early 20th century. That's one example of, how they just made knives better. When you look at this knife, it is rounded over here, but it's also square. You see how thick it is on the sides here? So they're just taking this knife and running it, the whole thing, down a belt sander and smoothing everything out, which is great. They're smoothing everything out, but they create this square look right there. See how square that looks? And you don't see that in older knives. See how that's all rounded out over, merging into the look on this Robeson. This is a big knife, big hefty piece of bone, and it's just rounded all the way over so that it merges into the liner, and it's better made. Okay, that's a better way to do it. And if you look at the top squares, you see they're all cleaned up, and these were mirror polished. And I haven't cleaned this up. That's a little dirty, but these are, I don't know whether you could pull it out. You can still see mirror polish in there. So they don't even worry about polishing the ends of these knives. This is a knife, stainless cutlery company was a branding of Camilla's. This is not a high-end knife, okay? This is not a Robeson or a Remington. This is a lower cost knife, but look at the mirror polish. And this knife is remarkable too. It's near mint condition. at least excellent condition. And this is what this knife would have looked like, pretty much brand new. It has been used, but look at the mirror polish on the top square. See that? And when you open this up, it's scratched up from use, but you can still see that deep mirror polish in this knife. And this is not a premium knife. Look at the inside of that. See how clean that looks in there? Mirror polished. And that's just the way they made them. And look at the jigging on this bone. I want to show you something on this GEC. So I'm gonna zoom in on this for you. Look at where, so they've put the scale on, and then they're cutting the scale, jigging the scale. Look, you can see it on the bolster there, where the jigging runs into the bolster. You see that? Looks great, right? Looks great, but you'll never see that in a knife from the early 20th century. You're just not going to see it. You can see it here. The jigging has come over. See it? See the gouges in the bolster? Beautiful knife, extremely well made. I love this knife, but it's not, it's not made like this knife. You don't have that jigging running into the, this is jigged, but it's not jigged into the bolster. And that's what we're talking about. They're better made, right? You do get a certain quality and consistency with machining on knives, but it's just not the same. And, this is a GEC knife right here. Really nice knife. Nice mirror polish. But when you look at the back, look at how the bolster is it's not mirror polished on the sides. And neither is the back spring. And I get that. It's an economic decision, right? It's trying to provide this knife at a price point people will buy it. But knives in the early 20th century, this was all polished here. If the bolsters were polished and the blades polished, the back spring's going to be polished. This is a half measure. This is a cost-cutting measure. And this is just an average knife, Canton cutlery. Look at the mirror polish on this knife. And I haven't cleaned this knife up, so there's a lot of scratches on that back spring. And this is not an expensive knife. You don't see those deep gouges in there. Mirror polish. Look at the inside on there. This is a Robertson in remarkable condition. And those tip bolsters are just, everything on this knife is shined. Look at the mirror polish on that. I can see myself. The back springs, mirror polished. Where do you see this blade? Look at that. There's just no question. These are good knives, but they're just not made to the same standard as knives were made in the 20th century. Even the cheap ones. This is a cheap knife. I'm not saying cheap, inexpensive. Canton cutlery wasn't a premium brand. This knife here was not a premium brand, but they were made, mirror polished. All the tolerances were within specs. Very tightly made, well made. Now, some of these knives they're not going to be the same size because a human being was doing all of this. You know, they'll be close, but there's all kinds of variances in these knives that you're not going to find in these knives because of the modern machining that these knives are used. I like this jigging. I don't know whether you do, but I mean, the jigging on these old knives, look at the jigging on that. What do you think's better? You know, I like this, but it's a quick and easy way to do this. It's a saw cut, and this is jigged out, irregular. It just looks a lot better. Here's another one, Excelsior knife, you know, and honestly, if they made knives like these today, you know, this knife would have to cost $300-400, you know, to produce it to the quality standards of the early 20th century knives. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm not demeaning these knives in any way at all. These are really nice knives, and I would recommend you getting one. But they're not made to the same quality. That's a pretty good job there. But again, look at the gouge in there. It's a big black spot, you know. So nice knife, but you know, this is brass pins, brass liner. This Robertson, same type of Coke bottle knife. Look at the matchstick on this Robertson. Look at how deep that is. Look at that. That's the way they used to make knives. And you know, you have nickel silver pins, nickel silver liners. It's all polished. You know, that's your top square. There's a difference, isn't there? Gouged out top square, unfinished, cleaned up. Anyhow, that's what I'm talking about. That's for Little Man's Corner. And why there is no comparison between these early 20th century knives and new modern knives, regardless of how they're manufactured. You know, they have to make these knives at a price point that people will buy them, and they have to cut corners to do that. And I don't hate them for it. It's just the environment that we live in nowadays. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this Little Man's Corner really enjoys this video and the comparison of these older knives to the GECs. And thanks for watching, guys, and supporting the channel.